For years, the world watched one of the richest and most famous athletes ever, and still missed his biggest story. While cameras followed his success, lives were being changed in total silence. No interviews, no headlines, no credit. Today, the truth about what Michael Jordan did behind closed doors is finally coming out, and it changes how you see him forever. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss an update. Dive into what really happened. No cameras, no headlines, no social media posts. For years, one of the most famous athletes in human history was changing lives in complete silence. While the world knew Michael Jordan as the man who dominated basketball courts, built a billion-dollar brand, and inspired generations with his competitive fire, very few people knew what he was doing when the lights were off and the crowds were gone. Behind closed doors, far away from arenas, interviews, and flashing cameras, Jordan was quietly helping families survive, students dream bigger, and communities rebuild, without ever asking for recognition. This was not a one-time gesture. It was a pattern, a habit of quiet generosity. At the peak of his fame, Jordan could not walk into a room without being noticed. Every move he made was analyzed, celebrated, or criticized. Yet when it came to giving back, he deliberately chose a different path. Anonymity. Money appeared where it was needed most. Scholarships arrived just before students were forced to quit school. Hospitals received support when resources were running low. Community programs stayed alive because someone somewhere cared enough to help. Most of the people who benefited never knew who the donor was. There were no press releases announcing his generosity. No charity events with his name in bold letters. No interviews explaining his kindness. Just action. Jordan understood something rare in a world driven by attention. Real impact does not require an audience. While fans debated his legacy online and critics discussed his business decisions, lives were quietly being changed in ways that would never trend on social media. A student finishing school. A family getting back on its feet. A community finding hope again. Years later, pieces of the truth began to surface, not because Jordan spoke, but because others did. A school administrator mentioned an anonymous donation that saved an entire program. Financial records eventually revealed the source. A healthcare worker spoke about funding that arrived at the perfect moment, with no name attached. Former students discovered, long after graduating, that the support they received came from someone they had idolized on television. Slowly, the silence started to speak. What made these acts powerful was not the amount of money, but the intention behind them. Jordan did not give to shape his image. He gave because he believed success carried responsibility. He never needed applause. He never needed credit. In fact, he avoided it. In an era where every good deed is documented, shared, and celebrated online, Jordan's choice to remain quiet feels almost shocking. But that silence revealed something deeper. Character. Today, as the truth finally comes out, it doesn't rewrite Michael Jordan's story. Completes it. Yes, he was a champion. Yes, he was a global icon. But he was also a man who understood that the greatest victories often happen far away from the spotlight. The real lesson here is not about fame or money. It's about purpose. You don't have to be loud to make a difference. You don't need recognition to change a life. Sometimes the most meaningful actions are the ones no one sees, until much later. And today, the world finally sees what was happening all along. Not just a legend on the court, but a quiet force for good beyond it. Michael Jordan never needed public praise. At the height of his fame, every move he made was already news. Cameras followed him everywhere. Headlines were written before he even spoke. His name alone could fill arenas and move markets. Fame, attention, and recognition were already guaranteed parts of his life. Yet when it came to giving back, he chose a path almost no celebrity chooses: privacy. While many public figures announce their donations, host charity events, or attach their names to buildings, Michael Jordan quietly stepped away from the spotlight. Not because he didn't care, but because he cared deeply about doing the right thing for the right reasons. Over the years, Jordan donated millions of dollars to causes that mattered deeply to him. He focused on areas where help could create real, long-term change rather than temporary attention. Education was one of those areas. Jordan believed that talent exists everywhere, but opportunity does not. Quiet donations supported education programs for underprivileged children, programs that helped schools stay open, classrooms stay funded, and students stay hopeful. Many of those children never knew who made their education possible. They only knew that someone believed in them. Healthcare was another priority. In struggling communities, access to proper medical care can mean the difference between survival and loss. Jordan quietly supported healthcare initiatives, helping hospitals and clinics improve their facilities, equipment, and patient care. There were no press releases, no photo opportunities, just resources arriving where they were urgently needed. Scholarships became another powerful tool for impact. Students with talent but no financial support often face impossible choices. Jordan's donations helped remove those barriers. Some students found out years later, sometimes after graduating, that the support that changed their future came from someone they once watched on television. In many cases, recipients didn't even know the money came from him. Hospitals received funding with no name attached. Students received scholarships without realizing who paid for them. Families received support without ever seeing his face. This anonymity was not accidental. It was intentional. Jordan believed that charity should lift people up, not turn them into stories. He didn't want gratitude directed at him. He wanted dignity preserved for those receiving help. In a world driven by visibility, his silence was rare. He understood that public praise can sometimes shift focus away from the people who matter most, the ones being helped. By staying private, he allowed the impact to speak louder than his name. Jordan once believed something simple but powerful. If you help someone, do it because it's right, not because it's seen. That belief shaped a different kind of legacy. Not one built only on trophies, records, or business success, but one built on responsibility and quiet compassion. It showed that greatness does not end when the game does. It continues in the choices made when no one is watching. Today, as more of these stories come to light, they reveal a side of Michael Jordan that statistics never could. A man who understood that influence is most meaningful when it's used carefully, and that the strongest impact often happens without noise. This is a legacy that doesn't fade with time, because lives changed quietly, last forever. The truth didn't come out through a press release. There was no official announcement. No carefully written statement sent to the media. Came out through people. For years, these stories existed quietly, scattered across different places and lives, never connected to a single name. Only much later did the full picture begin to form. One story came from a school principal in a struggling community. The school was close to shutting down its education program due to lack of funding. Teachers were preparing for layoffs. Students were about to lose access to basic resources. Then, unexpectedly, an anonymous donation arrived just in time. The program survived. Years later, while reviewing old records, the principal discovered the donor was Michael Jordan. At the time, no one knew, and no one was meant to know. Another story came from healthcare workers. A nurse spoke about a medical facility that desperately needed expansion to serve low-income patients. Space was limited. Equipment was outdated. Then funding appeared quietly, allowing the construction of a new medical wing. Patients received better care. Staff could finally breathe. There were no ceremonies. No names engraved on walls. Only results. Much later, documents revealed where the support had come from. Then there was the story of a student. A talented young person with big dreams but limited resources. Tuition costs were rising. Family support was stretched thin. Dropping out felt inevitable. Then a scholarship arrived, covering just enough to keep going. The student finished school, built a career, and moved forward in life. Years later, while looking back through scholarship records, the truth emerged. The donor was Michael Jordan. Until that moment, the student had never known. These stories weren't dramatic headlines. They didn't trend online. They weren't designed to impress anyone. But they changed everything for the people involved. What made these acts remarkable was not just their impact, it was their consistency. These weren't one-time gestures made during moments of public attention. They were repeated acts of generosity, happening year after year. Quiet support, steady commitment, real responsibility. While public conversations debated athletes, money, and fame, Jordan stayed far away from the noise. He wasn't responding to opinions. He wasn't shaping a public image. He was simply doing the work. Unseen. In a world where every move of a celebrity is analyzed and shared, his silence became unusual. But that silence allowed the focus to stay where it belonged, on the people being helped, not the person helping. Each story by itself seemed small. Schools saved. A hospital expanded. Students supported. But together they revealed something much bigger. They showed a pattern of values, a belief that success carries responsibility, and an understanding that impact matters more than recognition. These stories slowly surfaced not because Jordan wanted them to, but because time has a way of revealing truth. People talk. Records resurface. Gratitude finds its voice. And when the dots were finally connected, the message became clear. This was never about attention. It was about action. Jordan didn't need the world to see what he was doing. He trusted that doing the right thing was enough. These stories changed everything because they reminded people of something important. Greatness isn't always loud. Sometimes it works quietly in the background, shaping lives in ways that statistics and headlines never capture. And when those stories finally come to light, they don't just reveal generosity. They reveal character. So why didn't he talk about it? Why would someone with global fame, massive influence, and unlimited access to media choose silence when it came to doing good? Because Michael Jordan understood something many people miss. Public charity can inspire, but private charity reveals character. Jordan knew that attention changes intention. Once a good deed becomes public, it can slowly turn into performance. The focus shifts away from the people being helped and moves toward the person doing the helping. Jordan never wanted that shift to happen. In a rare comment, he once hinted that true giving shouldn't make the giver feel important. It should make the receiver feel supported, respected, and empowered. For him, charity wasn't about recognition, it was about responsibility. He didn't want his generosity to become a brand. In a world where names are placed on buildings, foundations, and campaigns, Jordan deliberately stepped away from that path. He didn't want his identity attached to every act of kindness. He wanted the results to matter more than the reputation. He didn't want applause to follow his kindness. Applause is temporary. Impact lasts longer. Jordan understood that praise can be distracting, can pressure people to give again for the wrong reasons, can turn compassion into expectation. By staying silent, he protected the purity of his intention. He wanted impact, not attention. This mindset became especially powerful in a modern world driven by social media. Today, almost every good deed is documented, shared, liked, and commented on. Helping others often becomes content. While that can raise awareness, it can also shift focus away from genuine connection. Jordan's silence stood in contrast to that culture. He didn't post photos. He didn't share updates. He didn't tell his story. And because of that, his actions spoke louder. His silence became his loudest statement. It sent a quiet message. You don't need an audience to do the right thing. You don't need validation to be generous. And you don't need recognition to change a life. Ironically, that silence made the truth even more powerful when it finally surfaced. When people eventually learned about his quiet giving, it felt authentic, not calculated. There was no suspicion of image building or publicity strategy. The time gap between the actions and the discovery proved one thing clearly. This was never about being seen. It was about being effective. Jordan's approach challenges how many people think about generosity today. It reminds us that real giving doesn't require explanation. It doesn't demand appreciation. simply requires commitment. By staying silent, Jordan allowed the people he helped to keep their dignity. He allowed the stories to remain about them, not about him. And he allowed the impact to exist without pressure. This is why his silence matters. Not because it was mysterious, but because it was intentional. It showed that true character is revealed in moments when no one is watching. When there is nothing to gain. When the only reward is knowing you did the right thing. And when that truth finally surfaced, it didn't need promotion. It spoke for itself. Today, when people talk about Michael Jordan, they don't just talk about championships, trophies, or iconic sneakers. They talk about character. For decades, the world saw Jordan as the ultimate competitor. A man driven by discipline, focus, and an unmatched desire to win. His success on the basketball court made him famous. His work ethic made him great. His influence reshaped sports and culture forever. But as the truth has slowly come to light, another side of his legacy has become impossible to ignore. Quieter side. Deeper side. People now talk about a man who understood that legacy is not only built on success, it is built on service. Basketball gave Jordan global recognition. It gave him wealth, power, and influence. But what he chose to do with that influence is what truly defines him today. Instead of seeking praise or admiration, he chose responsibility. Instead of asking to be seen, he chose to serve quietly. That choice matters. Because success alone does not define a person. Many people achieve success. Few use it to lift others without expecting anything in return. Jordan understood that winning games was only part of his journey. The greater challenge was deciding who he would be when the crowds were gone and the spotlight faded. And in those moments he chose generosity. Discipline made him great. It shaped his mindset. Pushed him through failure. It built the foundation of his legendary career. That same discipline carried into his life beyond sports. The discipline to stay focused, consistent, and committed to doing good without distraction. But generosity made him human. Generosity connected his success to purpose. Transformed achievement into meaning. It turned wealth into opportunity for others. And most importantly, it showed that strength is not only measured by dominance, but by compassion. The truth coming out today does not change who Michael Jordan was. It simply reveals who he always had been. These stories do not rewrite his legacy. They complete it. They remind us that the most powerful parts of a person's life are often the least visible. The decisions made in private. The actions taken without witnesses. The help given without conditions. And maybe that's the real lesson. You don't need recognition to make a difference. You don't need an audience to do good. You don't need your name attached to every action. You just need a heart willing to act. In a world that constantly encourages visibility, Jordan's story reminds us that quiet impact still matters. That true leadership doesn't always announce itself. And that real greatness often works in silence. His legacy is no longer just about what he achieved. It's about how he chose to use what he achieved. Not louder. Not flashier, but deeper. And that truth matters most of all.